Good day and welcome to Conversations with AARP in the Virgin Islands. I'm Troy Deshabert-Schuster, State Director of AARP in this territory. And once again, it's a pleasure to be with you. Thank you for tuning in to listen to us. And we have lots of important information to share with you, especially as we enter into this hurricane season. Disasters happen in every community and can strike at any time. In 2017, Hurricanes Irma and Maria caused widespread damage and destruction in the Virgin Islands, leaving many residents without the essentials. While the government leads the effort to rescue and recovery, there were several community agencies that helped to supplement the government's efforts to get resources to those in need. Today's discussion focuses on a community partner that organizes other agencies to build stronger, better community responses by connecting available resources during a disaster. And so joining our conversation today is Jay Rollins. And Jay is the chair of the local voluntary organization active in disaster organization, or VOAD. Jay, welcome to the show.
Good day, Troy. Thank you.
Yeah, and so tell us what VOAD is all about, Jay. And again, tell us all about this long acronym.
The acronym is certainly easier than the entire name. So VOAD is a national organization, and it came into existence over 50 years ago in response to Hurricane Camille, which struck the Gulf Coast. What they saw at the time, where there were lots of faith-based organizations, nonprofits, government organizations, all trying to help at the same time. And it seemed that there was no organization behind it. That there were some groups that were getting a lot of help, but then there were other groups that were being completely left out, not intentionally, but that's the way that it worked. So they came up with this concept of the VOAD, and this is to get together before the fact, so that everybody knows, the right hand knows what the left hand is doing, so to speak. So in 1970, it was 7 national organizations came together to officially form the National VOAD. And today there are 56 VOADs in every state and territory within the United States, and the Virgin Islands is no exception. So in the Virgin Islands, the VOAD has been around since Hurricane Hugo, sort of the beginnings of it, and was very active in the territory up until 2015. In 2015, we had enough blue skies that participation had kind of waned, and we were a little bit taken off guard in 2017 when the storms came through. So we worked with the national organization, and they said, go ahead and form your long-term recovery groups on each island, your LTRGs, and we will work to get the VOAD back in good standing once you're a little further into recovery. So within the last year, we have been in this recovery long enough that we've got the VI VOAD back standing up. We are working with our local government partners and with our local nonprofits, small businesses, and faith-based organizations to ensure that the Virgin Islands has a strong VOAD.
Okay, so there's a VOAD in each state and territory, 56 in total. And I've also heard about COAD. So
right.
Tell us about COAD.
So there's a big umbrella structure for the territory. That's the VOAD. Then because we recognize the fact that each island is a little bit individual, there are different needs on each island, and there may be some strengths on some island that are weaknesses on other islands. So we have COADs. COAD simply stands for Community Organizations Active in Disaster. The way you see this play out stateside is generally, there'll be the New Jersey VOAD, but then there'll be the Monmouth County COAD, because that county can focus a little bit more on that county's needs. But it's a lot of the same leaders, it's a lot of the same organizations, but this allows us to not only coordinate as a territory, but also on each island. One of the lessons that we learned in 2017, Irma came through and really, really devastated St. Thomas and St. John, and we were using St. Croix as sort of a base until Maria had other ideas and came through 10 days later. And suddenly we had an entire territory where we couldn't really have a hub, and we didn't really have a plan for not having one island where we could work off of. So this is our way of not only being able to coordinate for our own island, but also to coordinate as a territory so we have a plan in place should something similar happen in the future.
And earlier you mentioned the long-term recovery group. So
Yeah.
the Virgin Islands VOAD had lapsed, and the national organization encouraged you to start up a long-term recovery group and then work toward establishing the VOAD.
Right.
So the long-term recovery groups, are they still in existence, or have they been incorporated into the VOAD? How does that work?
So yeah, the long-term recovery groups are currently still in existence. We are in the phase of modifying them back into official COADs. And frankly, had the VOAD been strong at the time of the storms, it would have been the VOAD through the COADs that ignited and established the LTRGs on each island. We kind of built the plane while we were in mid-flight, so to speak. So we needed to get the long-term recovery groups focused so that we could focus on recovery, whereas the COADs and the VOADs will ultimately be focused more on preparedness for the next disaster.
Okay, so
It's a very complicated structure.
right. And you and I have talked about this in the past, and I think finally the lights are turning on in my mind today. But
I should have brought an org chart to present.
Right, that would be helpful next time for sure. But so now so if I'm understanding it correctly, the long-term recovery groups will continue in existence because that's all about recovery.
Right.
But they'll work sort of parallel to or along with the VOAD and the COADs because that's geared toward preparation for.
Yeah, we will work hand in hand, and the LTRG acronym may disappear over the next year, assuming we have no other disasters this year, which we hope. But we don't have the luxury here in the territory to ever really be just in a phase of preparedness. We're still seeing recovery efforts from Hugo, so we will always be working some sort of parallel track where we are always thinking about resiliency. We are always thinking about preparedness, how we can better prepare for the next disaster, how every community within our community has a preparedness plan, and how every individual within our community has a preparedness plan. Because it's only through those individual preparedness plans that we will truly be able to be resilient when these storms come through, or when the earthquakes strike, or when the tsunamis hit. Or when your neighbor's house burns down, that's a disaster for them. So we think of all encompassing all disasters and how to prepare for all of them.
So in the Virgin Islands, how many long-term recovery groups and how many COADs do we have?
So we have 3 long-term recovery groups, one in St. Croix, one in St. Thomas, and one in St. John. And now we have 3 COADs on each of those islands, with Water Island also being sort of pulled into St. Thomas. And then at the sort of the umbrella piece is the Virgin Islands VOAD. So in St. Croix, Ms. Delia Richardson, who is the current executive director of the St. Croix Long-Term Recovery Group, is also the chair of the St. Croix COAD. In St. Thomas, I have Pastor Ronald Walker, who is the chair of the St. Thomas COAD. And in St. John, I've got Ms. Megan Enright, who is the executive director of Love City Strong. She's serving as the chair of the St. John COAD. She's also serving as the vice chair of the VOAD. Pastor Walker is the treasurer of the VOAD, and Delia is an executive member of the VOAD. So it's a lot of the same players. You hear a lot of our names in similar spaces, so it can be very confusing. But ultimately, our goal is to not worry so much about structure and to worry more about the impact that we're having in the community.
Excellent. And just for our listening audience, AARP nationally is very much a part of the VOAD all across the country, including here in the Virgin Islands and the VOAD, also in the COADs because we serve the entire territory. And prior to that, we were part of the long-term recovery groups,
Yeah.
and we still sort of have our hand in that, but we focus mostly on the VOAD and the COAD at this point from the AARP perspective. So yes, even with AARP, we overlap right across those groups, across those organizations.
Absolutely.
And so what other kinds of organizations do you have locally? Like maybe just give us some examples of organizations that are members.
Sure.
Comprehensively.
Yeah, so we have organizations that have national representation that are members. So you've got your Catholic Charities, you've got your AARP, you've got your Lutheran Social Services. Those national organizations that also have a local presence is one of the benefits of VOAD. Then we have, in St. Croix alone, we've got a list of 115 faith leaders that we've been working with. One of the ways that we know we can get information out post-disaster and even during blue skies is the term that we use that currently when there's no disasters pending. That's one of the best ways across the country to get messages into the community is through faith leaders. And it's often something that's overlooked by government, not intentionally, but it's just not the headspace that government's in, that says, hey, we've got a group of leaders here that meet weekly with influential people and with our community members. And if we give them the information, they can share and they can make a difference. And so that's one of the ways that I feel like, especially in the Virgin Islands, we have a stronger impact is through our faith leaders and these faith leader networks that we've been building up.
Yeah, faith organizations of faith are so important all across the country. You know, we always hear about faith-based organizations being very active whenever there's any crisis in a community, especially natural disasters. So I'm glad our communities of faith are very active here in the Virgin Islands as well with the VOAD and the COADs. Super important. And so earlier you mentioned that VOAD is mostly about being prepared for disaster.
Yeah.
Now, when a disaster strikes, how does VOAD function?
So there's a couple of ways. Primarily, I should say that the VOAD sits under the ESF-VI, the Emergency Service Function 6, which is under Department of Human Services. And so for us to engage or for us to be engaged, we would take a directive from VITEMA via ESF-VI. Ideally, before the disaster strikes, we know exactly what VITEMA would come to us for, whether that's, hey, we're going to need help with transportation, getting folks from one area of the community to a distribution point. Or, hey, we may need some volunteers. For instance, we recently helped deliver sandbags to seniors and folks with disabilities. That was something that VITEMA came to us in partnership with the ADA coordinator from the governor's office, Mr. Julian Hendley, Public Works, Department of Human Services. All these groups came together to make this happen. So we never act independently. We always act in a coordinated manner. In fact, we talk about our 4 C's or our primary principle: communication, coordination, collaboration, and cooperation. So it's important for us to be filling any gaps that we've identified before a disaster happens. And it's also our goal to stay out of the way so that we are not causing redundancies or duplication of benefits, or inadvertently creating more havoc than help.
Interesting. So you mentioned that VOAD is under the Department of Human Services. Can you tell us how that relationship works, how that's established, and how it functions?
Sure. So our government is set up with emergency service functions, where VITEMA is the emergency management agency. Each of the emergency service functions underneath them, and I think there are 13 or 14. We should probably get a government official to verify that number. Each one has a certain primary function during emergency times, and ESF-VI is primarily about sheltering and about transportation and about helping a community, and that's human services essentially. And so that's where we support the most. You're not going to see us out there clearing power lines. You're not going to see us out there, unless asked, to clear debris. And we do have folks that will train to do that, but our primary function will be supporting whatever human services needs. And if someone comes to human services to ask for additional assistance, that's how we would coordinate.
Well, that's really great to know. I'm glad to know that VOAD isn't sort of a lone ranger, doing something. It's important to be very coordinated in times of disaster, because if not, you can have organizations running into other organizations and causing a disaster in and of itself, right? So,
and that's exactly what we want to prevent. And that's one of the reasons why we immediately moved in 2017 to our LTRG formation, because almost immediately we saw those containers showing up with unsolicited donations. We saw that was one of the biggest things. And the government could call us and say, there's a container sitting at the port taking up space that we need to get other vital supplies. Can you all take this on? And that was something that we were able to take on. Ideally, we will plan for this a little better in the future, because we'll have that structure in place, because those unsolicited donations, we know no matter what are going to come in. And it's just important. The coordination is the key in my mind. One of the things that we're working on right now as a VOAD is asset mapping. And so we are literally asset mapping on every single island. And what I mean by asset mapping is we're going to all of our partner organizations. We're going to every small business. We are slowly but surely working our way from one end of the territory to the other to find out what organizations have what supplies, have what goods, have what services that can be provided in times of disaster, and mapping it so that we know if a disaster comes through and affects one side of the island or one island in general more than the other, we know where we can draw on our resources from ahead of time, and we have that plan in place. So that's one of the big pieces that we're working on currently.
That's fantastic. And so as a result of this, you're working with Vitima and Human Services, I would imagine, and always planning and just always fully prepared and helping others to prepare.
Right. I'm in a lot of meetings, Troy.
I'm sure. Every year for most of the year. For most of the year. It never ends because, I mean, not only do we have the hurricane season, but always a threat of tsunami. So
Right.
there's always need to be prepared for that.
There's a threat of tsunamis. There's a threat of earthquakes. We've watched that with our sister islands in Puerto Rico. There's the threat of wildfires right now. We haven't had rain in so long, and it's so dry. So we are, we're such a microcosm because we are so small. It feels like we have we have more disasters or the potential for disasters than anyone deserves. I think it does play out this way across the United States. It just doesn't. I tell potential donors and potential partners, if you want to figure out how to create an incredible disaster recovery program, come do it in the Virgin Islands, because we provide literally every logistical nightmare that you can think of to create a successful recovery program. And one of the other reasons why we want our community to be so involved is because we understand that we are a logistics nightmare. And so how do we, in a territory that imports 90% of its goods, how do we survive and thrive in times of disaster without having to rely completely on government assistance coming in, because we know it's going to be 4 to 5 days before that assistance gets to us. So that's really the other big program that we are just now piloting and that we're just thinking of, as we are looking at community resiliency hubs. And these will be physical spaces in communities across the territory that are literally equipped for times of disaster. So there'll be solar power there, there'll be charging stations there, there'll be place to store food, locally sourced food, not MREs. So we're not on that horrible MRE diet that we all went through in 2017. That has refrigeration, so folks that need to refrigerate their medications can do it. And they will be operated by community and owned by community. There may be a nonprofit organization sort of overseeing it, and it may ultimately be the COADs overseeing it. But the idea is that I don't want folks in Frederickstead to have to go all the way mid-island 5 days post-disaster to get any type of relief. And we've seen that play out. So how do we move this into an even more locally sourced resiliency model? So that's my ultimate goal is to move us into these community resiliency hubs. And we've seen these in Puerto Rico. Puerto Rico established these with a partner, Mercy Corps. They've got, I think, 52 or 53 throughout Puerto Rico now. And we're watching and we're learning from them. And again, we're working with Puerto Rico VOAD and these partners to see how we model that here in the Virgin Islands.
It seems like every year we just become better and better experts at this whole thing of preparing and dealing with disasters and learning from the past and developing new procedures. So that's really important. I'm glad there's a continuity and that we're even learning from our sister islands too.
Yeah, I think not only the U.S. sister islands, but we have other lessons to be learned from all Caribbean islands. And that's one of the places where the VOAD and community organizations can branch where our government might not be able to branch. And partnering with other organizations across the Caribbean, because we all face very similar issues.
Yes.
How we relate to our governments may be different, but there are lessons learned because there have been peoples inhabiting these islands for a very long time and dealing with these disasters. And some of the most basic preparedness pieces we've moved away from, largely because we now have a reliance on our government, which is fine. But the more we try to rely on our government to take care of us, the more burden that puts on our government. And it puts an expectation on the government. FEMA doesn't come in Superman capes. FEMA is really here to support the local government, but they're not here to solve all the problems. And so we really have to move back into a mentality of neighbor helping neighbor, community helping community, and being prepared for whatever comes our way, knowing that something's going to come our way.
For sure. And it's so refreshing to see community organizations working hand in hand with the government. All too often, people tend to just sit back and rely on the government, and they want the government to do everything. And then when things don't go right, then they criticize the government and throw stones at our elected officials and so forth. But as I've said so many times over the years, it's important for us to work together with our government on a variety of issues.
Yep.
And of course, issues of natural disaster are significant. And so this acronym, Voluntary Organizations Active in Disaster, focusing on organizations coming together.
Mm-hmm.
But what if there are individuals who are not part of any one of the member organizations, but they want to be involved in the VOAD? How does that work?
Right now, we have a very open membership model because our goal is to pull in as much community support as possible. And I can tell you specifically, we have one volunteer in St. Croix, Ms. Lori Edwards, who is a member of a local church, but has been the head of our wellness committee through the LTRG since 2017. And she's been the one that's been out knocking on faith-based institutions' doors, really working this network. So there's a variety of opportunity. And we have our monthly meetings via Zoom on the last Friday of the month. You can go to our website, vivoad.org, and get more information. But right now, any community member that wants to be a part, we welcome with open arms. It doesn't necessarily have to be an organization. You may be affiliated with an organization. If you go to any type of church, synagogue, temple, that's, if you can get a message back into that organization, if we're not working with your faith leader, that's a win-win. Because ultimately we know it's going to be the messaging, accurate messaging. That's a big piece post-disaster, is accurate messaging and accurate information. And the more that we have these inroads into our community so that the correct and right information is being spread, and knowing where to have resources. Again, it's the neighbor helping neighbor model. So you can visit our website. You can there's a contact us button there. We will happily connect you. You're more than welcome to come to any of our Friday, 3 o'clock, the last Friday of the month, 3 o'clock Zoom meetings for our monthly meetings. We recently had a representative from Senator Thoreau's office talking about the current recovery programs. We've had Director Joshin from Vitima. We get the Director of Human Services, Commissioner Causey Gomez. So we try to bring information to that meeting, but we also hear what's happening in the community to make sure, again, that what we see at the local level is what the government officials are also made aware of and seeing on their level, so they can advocate.
Now, as we're in the height of hurricane season, really approaching the very peak of it next month, what advice would you give to our audience, just very briefly, as to how to prepare for a hurricane?
The best way to prepare for a hurricane is to prepare yourself. What is your emergency preparedness plan? And you've heard you've heard Commissioner Gomez talk about this. We have a severe lack of shelters in the territory. We had a lack of shelters before 2017. You put COVID on top of that, there's a severe lack of shelters. Every community member should have a plan of where they need to evacuate to, and it may not be a shelter. It may be a neighbor's house. It may be an auntie's house. For Maria, I ended up at a friend's house for more than 30 days after the storm. But having those plans in place so you're not calling the day of 2 days before, but you know where you're going to go. You know what documents you're taking with you. You know that you've got a little bit of cash that you can bring with you. It doesn't have to be a lot, but we know that access to cash after storms is an issue. So having that personal preparedness plan in place is a huge piece. And through the LTRG and through Ms. Delia Richardson, we do offer virtual and in-person preparedness workshops. So I would also offer that up for the community, and she can do any island.
Fantastic. And for information on the organization VIVOAD and how to get involved and how to participate in the meetings, where can people go? Give us that web address again, please.
It's vivoad.org.
Okay, and so any concerned individual can join a meeting? Is it open?
Absolutely. They are open meetings.
Okay.
We are a community organization.
Great. That's wonderful, and I hope that more people will get involved. We have lots of skills and talents here in the Virgin Islands, and I hope that more people will put that to good use to help others to prepare and also to recover. And for the long-term recovery groups, can they also come in contact with the long-term recovery groups through VIVOAD?
Absolutely.
Okay, excellent. Well, Jay Rollins, thank you so much for being with us today. We've been speaking with Jay Rollins, the chair of the Virgin Islands VOAD, which is the Voluntary Organizations Active in Disaster. And he also helps to coordinate the COADs, the Community Organizations Active in Disaster, and works along with the long-term recovery groups on St. Croix, St. Thomas, and St. John. Thanks so much, Jay, for being with us today, and we hope to have you back with us again on a show in the near future.
Thank you, Troy. I appreciate it.
Pleasure.